All right, welcome back. It is still the Ultimate Money Show, the second edition here in the week. My name is Dimma. Apologies that we couldn't bring you that sports mix. Yes, a little bit of a technical issue there from the network studio, but do not worry, we are still working on it to get that done. But for now, let's get to give you the update this morning, talking about those stories that are dominating the papers this morning. Have quite a number of the papers. And by the way, we are actually live on YouTube right now, and it is Raypower Abuja where you can watch this. Starting off with the Daily Asset newspaper. ICPC slams fresh 9-count corruption charge on El-Rufai. Alleges span 11 billion naira real deal, $1 million loan misuse, illegal benefits. Hearing continues today, being Tuesday. Now, this story is on page 2 of the Daily Assets today. Again, suspected herdsmen invade Benue community and sadly kill 14 persons. And residents flee as gunmen operate for over 3 days. Reps, local government chiefs demand urgent federal intervention. Now, this story is on page 2, although opens on the front page here of the Daily Asset. JAMB adjusts arrival time for 2026 UTME. You might want to find out that good news for parents who are hoping their children might get there on time or otherwise. Now, this is on page 16 of the Daily Asset newspaper. Customs deploy AI training to boost revenue drive. Page 4 read. Federal government opens applications for second cohort of TVET. Now, this is on page 15. Insurance gross claims rise to 724.5 billion naira in the fourth quarter of 2025. Well, details on that is on page 2. Also opens on the front page here. Leo becomes first Pope to visit Algeria as start of major Africa tour, talking about Pope Leo XIV, and this is on page 27. Frimpong dies after robbery attack on team bus. That's sad story there. Well, that is on page 30. Well, this wraps up the Daily Asset, the front page of the Daily Asset this morning. We want to check out next that of Al Jazeera Nigeria. Again, Tinubu meets security chiefs as terrorists kill army colonel and 4 others in Borno State. That story is on page 9. Be security conscious, adhere to safety, NYSC urges core members. Page 6 read. Abamon's Kanu Rep and Danjuma Hassan. This is on page 9. 2,102 PhD candidates jostle for PTDF Overseas Scholarship. That's a huge number. Well, this story is on page 17. And ahead of 2027, Accord cautions politicians against inflammatory remarks. This is on page 16. 77 Uni Abuja students bag first-class degrees. Well, that's number. And this is on page 14. Man gets life imprisonment for sexually assaulting neighbor's baby. Well, this story opens on the front page here, continues on page 7. No request from ADC to rent Eagle Square for convention, according to Wike, the FCT minister. Well, this also opens on the front page here. You can finish that up on page 20 for the Al Jazeera Nigeria. Now I want to check out the Daily Sun. Outrage over murder of Colonel, 6 soldiers in fresh terrorist raid. Mopol, 9 others killed in renewed attacks in Benue. Pages 4 and 6. Crude jumps to 8% on ceasefire collapse. Marketers milled a hike. OPEC cuts output to 500,000 barrels per day. Opens on the front page here, continues on page 25. Meanwhile, an IMF warns Nigeria, others against policy misstep, says Middle East crisis has pushed nations into survival mode. This is on page 2. I will soon decide on Abia Guba contest, says Reps Deputy Speaker Kalu. Page 26. Wike says, I never denied ADC others use of Eagle Square. Faction sacks Atiku Bashir in Adamawa State. Page 27 read. And Sharia Council insists on resignation of INEC chairman. Page 8. And Ndume cries over escalating insecurity in Boko Haram, in Borno State, rather. Sorry about that. The story is on page 5. Well, that wraps up the Daily Sun. We want to check out the Observer's Times newspaper. Starting off with the big story here, ADC convention moves to event center following rejection claims. Wike denies any foul play. This is on page 1. And ahead of 2027, Atiku's aide counters Keyamo, question Tinubu's record, and page 4. IGP deploys DIG to Kaduna as police rescue victims after a RICO attack. Page 5, read there. And now EFCC warns banks against unsecured loans in Lagos. Page 6, read. I want to find out why that warning came in. NDLEA, on the other hand, arrests medical doctor over alleged cocaine trafficking. A medical doctor, cocaine trafficking. Well, that story is on page 7. ICPC slimes 9-count charge on El-Rufai. Court fixes bail ruling. Page 8. Man bags life sentence for sexually assaulting 6 months old. Page 3. I'm not afraid of you, Pope tells Trump. Opens on the front page here, continues on page 2. Well, that wraps up the Observer Times newspaper. Quite interesting and bold statement there. Moving on to the Blueprint newspaper. Big story is on the Middle East crisis. Says federal government cuts tariff on vehicles and on food and on industrial inputs. Experts louds the decision, call for protection of local farmers, fear revenue laws. Pope tackles Trump, says, I'm not afraid of you. Opens on the front page of the Blueprint, continues on page 8. Army loses commanding officer. 6 orders to IEDs in Borno State. We must train harder for operational efficiency, coming from Olatunji. Well, this one opens on the front page as well and continues on page 8. Mark-led ADC defies INEC, holds convention today, also opening on the front page of the Blueprint and finishes up on page 8. Wike-backed PDP faction renovates national secretariat ahead of resumption. Page 6, read there. Now, World Bank advice may drag Nigeria back into fuel import trap. Well, this is a statement coming from an expert, or rather some experts, and this is on page 20. ICPC slime Nanscard charge against El-Rufai, page 11. Ogun APC adopts Yayi as consensus Kuba candidate, page 6, read. And Borno government closed Jili Gazabure market 5 years ago. Now, this is a confirmation coming from the Governor Zulum, and this is on page 6 of the Blueprint newspaper. Court refuses to stop TITA NNPCL orders from pipeline protection, page 17, read. All right, to the Daily Trust newspaper. Against all odds, ADC holds convention. That's the big story here. And this opens on the front page of the Daily Trust, continues on pages 3 and 4. Tariff cuts on vehicle rise could weaken local production, according to experts, page 21. Do you agree? Courts to rule on El-Rufai's bail application today, page 6, read. Daily Trust apologizes over wrong use of pictures. This is on page 4. Again, commander soldiers killed in Boko Haram ambush, page 5, read. And ACO leaders visit Gombe governor, declare support for Tinubu's second term, backs Yamaltu Deba Senate aspiration. Story is on page 7, and that's it from the Daily Trust. Over now to the Nigerian News Direct. Ogun APC leaders endorse Yayi as consensus candidate for 2026 Goba is the big story here, and you can find that on page 6 of the Nigerian News Direct. I never accepted solicited bribes. This is a statement coming from Diziani. That's on page 6. ADC secures venue for convention as Wike denies restricting Eagle Square usage. Page 23. Oil price surge above $100 following failed peace talk. US blockade. Page 14. ICPC files amendment charge against El-Rufai, and this is on page 22. 6 soldiers killed in ISWAP attack on Mongono military base. Page 22, read as well. Well, let's check out the Daily Monitor. The big story is insecurity can end in 6 months if the federal government is serious. This is coming from the senator representing Borno South Senatorial District, Aline Dume, says more writers to the story laments continued loss of military personnel, including senior officers, says such incidents highlight deeper operational challenges. Well, this opens on the front page of the Daily Monitor. Quite interesting statement, you would say, and continues on page 2. Now, on the Middle East crisis, Nigeria's economy in shock, according to finance, says federal government determined to grow Nigeria's macroeconomic stability, attract and scale investment. This opens on the front page as well and continues on page 2. Ahead of 2027, North is Nigeria's greatest asset. I'll prioritize its development. This statement is coming from the former Labour Party presidential candidate, Peter Obi, says nobody can build what I intend to build in the North. Well, this opens on the front page and continues on page 2 as well. Federal government warns security personnel against diversion of official arm. Very huge one. Page 4, read. ADC holds national convention today amid crisis. Page 2. El-Rufai petition CJN seeks Justice RM Aikawa removal from his trial. This is on page 4. And commanding officers, 6 others killed by IED in Mongono. Page 2, read. That's it for the Daily Monitor, and that's largely it for the papers we checked out today. The Daily Assets, the Al Jazeera Nigeria, Blueprint newspaper, Nigerian News Direct, Daily Sun, Observer's Times, Daily Trust, as well as the Daily Monitor. No business story for today. Quite interesting. Politics ongoing. You ordinarily will expect that. No brainer. Insecurity is still going on. So sad. It was just yesterday that we read in the papers how, the NAV, the Nigerian Air Force, launched this attack, tried to eliminate some elements, or should I call that, at Gili Market. And now we're seeing what looks like a very sad one on that actually is a very sad one on the commanding officers, and 6 of them also killed in Borno State using an IED. That is very sad, very painful. But what's one thing that is interesting is the statement coming from Senator Aline Dume here, saying with confidence that insecurity can end, not that it can end, but that it can end in 6 months with a clause. If the federal government is serious. Is this saying that the federal government has really not been serious with tackling the issue of insecurity in Nigeria? Like, is this implying that for a very long time, we've been dealing with this, losing loved one, death, and all of that has been that someone has been playing games on the lives of Nigerians and taking some people for granted? If this statement is coming from a senator who is making this with a lot of confidence, meaning that there is a level of maybe neglect on the efforts or so-called attempts to tackle and deal with the issue of insecurity in Nigeria. Hold on, just a little bit on that. Ndume stated this on Monday during an interview on Channels Television Politics Today program, where he expressed concern over the recent escalation of violence, particularly in the Northeast. And the lawmaker stressed that beyond complaints, what is required is decisive action and political will. All right. So with him, he said it's not about complaining. It's not about asking somebody like me as a senator to say why these things. I always believe that if the president and the federal government of Nigeria are serious about this, we can end this thing called insecurity in 6 months. That's exactly the statement coming from Senator Aline Dume. It shows that this can be dealt with. So the big question is, why then have we been struggling with this issue of insecurity? Why then have we been trying so hard to deal with matters like this? I mean, it raises a huge concern if this can be sorted out, according to him. Well, it's quite sad. It's quite painful, and it's not Is something that we could have done better in. If truly that is the case, if we know who they are, as some of us have already mentioned, if we know where they are coming from and things like that, why hasn't it been dealt with? Why are lives still wasting on the altar of insecurity in Nigeria? Very sad, very painful. Anyway, talking about a little bit on politics here, the ADC still having issues with INEC. I should want to say now a faction of the ADC still having issues with INEC and still determined to go on with convention just to prepare. You would call that an effort to be ready for 2027. I mean, you have to hold your convention, make your peak and all of that for you to stand tall and say, I'm ready to contest in the upcoming election. And it appears that that effort keeps meeting lots of walls, lots of gridlock as far as it is concerned. The news has it that about 2 venues were sought out and 2 venues were rejected. And now another third venue is the option. And it appears that some of them seem to say, oh, maybe the FCT minister is not the one helping us out with this, but the FCT minister is out to say, look, I didn't stop anybody. No, nothing came to my table, no request to make use of the Eagle Square. Whom do we believe? But at the end of the day, that's what's going on with the party. Adequate time to prepare. Some of that faction is saying that they have sacked the former Vice President Atiku Abubakar from the ADC. All of the drama, intra-party politics, intra-party crisis still going on. Like I would say, like we have said on this platform, never spells well, never says anything good for the party getting prepared, being ready, being adequate. But that's by the side for political parties. I mean, during any event, or say election, or even anybody's preparing for anything, you can expect some of these busy actions, activities going on in some of these corners and in the quarters, intra-party politics, inter-party problems still going on, getting themselves ready and all of that. We can expect that. But what about we as Nigerians? Yes, we are spectating. We're seeing what's going on in some of these political parties, but how prepared are we to deal with it? And how prepared is INEC getting ready and not just, issuing statements or countering what has been said or allegations, accusation and counter accusations going on. INEC is not doing this. INEC is not doing that. What about sensitization? What about preparing the people? What about, trying to read the people's mind off of this menace we've had, or should I call it let me just put it that way, where we always encounter this poor turnout when it has to do with elections. I am worried about what that will spell out during this upcoming election, because sometimes when you talk to Nigerians, they'll be like, why am I even going to stress myself for this? Why am I even going to go out there to go and vote? People will do what they want. They've already picked up who they want. That voter apathy is something that I believe lies on INEC to start now, that there is time to keep the people's mind, ready, prepare the people, try to take that mentality off of Nigerians. When we had when there was the FCT election here, the chairmanship elections, the local, the area council elections now, you saw poor voter turnout. And it was said that those are the things that will be used to, find out how the big game will eventually turn out to be. It was the FCT election and that of the Anambra Guba election. These are the two. Okay, now the Anambra Guba election was one that was done under the new INEC chairman, Professor Joash Amopiton, and the FCT election also done under him, trying to find out what it would look like. But that seemed to be that the vote turnout there was so poor. What is INEC doing right now regarding that? How are we getting the people's mind ready towards the election? The party politics will go on. You can't take it out of them. I think it's part of their nature. You can just always have that. But what about the Nigerians who should be prepared adequately? What's INEC doing on that? What's the sensitization like right now? What's the preparedness like right now for those who will be ready? What are you looking out for? What would you do? These are the things in terms of also the registration. I think the revalidation has been halted, but then again, efforts to make sure that people can vote comfortably where they are, since what we are going to be using will be the manual vote and not electronic voting. At least let there be that preparedness for that, which is very important. In addition to, of course, the party politics and everything that is going on, which you cannot take away from that. Anyway, before I wrap up, just want to say that it's quite sad when you find individuals, human beings who behave something like something else. I'm talking about the news or the story here that has man bagging life in sentence for sexually assaulting not just a neighbor's baby, but a child that is just 6 months old. I mean, bagging life in sentence, you would say, is justice given, very adequate. Not wanting to see such a thing is one thing that I believe our system should try as much as possible not to condone. I don't know how one would really think of something like that, but then, I mean, it's so sad. It is very sad. It is. Anyway, Pope Leo XIV is making a tour in Africa. We are hearing some countries mentioned: Cameroon, Algeria, Equatorial Guinea. Hoping he will come to Nigeria. Anyway, that's it. That's about it for the newspaper review for now. Maybe you can just, go through the papers, go check out the headlines, and get details of some of the stories. This we checked out as far as today is concerned: the Daily Assets, Daily Sun, Al Jazeera Nigeria, Blueprint, Nigerian News Direct, Observer's Times, Daily Trust, as well as the Daily Monitor newspaper, whichever, and more of the stories. Just the most important thing is stay updated and get your news right and the facts right, as well as make sure that you are preparing yourself ahead of 2027. I don't want to hear they go do their thing. Then any decision that is taken affects you and I as Nigerians. So we just have to do better. All right, let's just wrap up with this coming from Felixian and the Stickman Project, and it's titled Rain in Ibiza. I hope that that's what it is. Yes, Rain in Ibiza. So let's go with that as we wrap up this morning. Thank you so much for being a part of it.
Providing 360 degrees of information and entertainment. Reloaded for today's Niger.
Raypower. 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 Raypower.
Nigeria's original independent radio station.
What's your name? Nice to meet you. Por favor, señorita. You're the